Amanda, I want to ask you something before we start properly.
Okay, go on.
If you were a landlord, not a property manager, not someone who does this for a living, just a regular person who bought a couple of houses, maybe a flat, built it up over the last 10, 15, 20 years as part of your pension retirement plan, would you still be doing that today?
Me personally, you want the honest answer?
Yeah, honestly.
Well, yeah, I would.
And that's the question that underlies everything we're going to talk about today, because the data says a lot of landlords have already answered it. And the answer was a resounding hell no. I'm Paul Samuda, Director of Essential Management, and this is the Essential Property Podcast, the real world version of what it's like to run a property business in 2026.
And I'm Amanda, running that property business, and I think this week nearly broke me.
Bit dramatic.
Well, yeah, maybe a bit dramatic, but HMO inspection after HMO inspection, and even I had five yesterday in one day. So yeah, it did, and I'll let you be the judge.
Okay, well, today we're covering eight things, going to be a mega podcast. Where have all the landlords gone? Why rent to rent is, and I'm choosing my words carefully here,
I don't think you are.
okay? Why rent to rent is a mug's game. The opportunities post May the 1st, why we're still buying, how stressed we both actually are, Amanda's mega inspection marathon, anti-landlord protests, and the Straits of Hormuz, which I promise is relevant.
Yeah, I'm sure it is relevant. Let's get stuck into it.
Well, let's start with the exodus, shall we? Where have all the landlords gone? Because that's what it is, an absolute exodus. And it's been happening for a few years. But 2025 and 2026 have accelerated to the point where you can actually feel a little bit of a vacuum in the market.
Yeah, you can feel it in the market, but what does the data say?
Well, we did some research on this and we came up with the PRS, or the private rented sector, lost tens of thousands of landlords between 2022 and 2025. HMRC, Property Mark surveys, NRLA all said the same thing. They all point the same direction. Small landlords, the ones with one, two, three properties, are exiting. They're running for the hills. They're not downsizing, they're exiting.
I know, and it's not even evenly distributed, is it? Because the portfolio landlords generally, unless they are quite long in the tooth, they're staying in the game.
Yeah, you're right. If they're retiring, maybe it's a good time for to sell. But no, the people leaving are the ones who bought a house maybe in the 90s or the noughties, rented it out when they moved, never really thought of themselves as landlords, and have spent the last 5 years being told by the government, by the media, by the internet that they're the actual enemy.
I know, it's awful. And it's sort of the accidental landlord they've been branded, haven't they?
Yeah, the accidental landlord who woke up one morning to a Section 24 bill, then a stamp duty surcharge on their purchase, then the abolition of Section 21, then the prospect of periodic tenancies, and thought, I didn't sign up for this shit. I'm out of here.
You know what? And I don't blame them to a degree because, the government have made it really, really hard. And operationally, if landlords have been doing this themselves, they don't want the stress, they don't want the bother. Or perhaps they actually can't afford to do it. If the property's not delivering enough of a margin, maybe they can't afford to do all this new stuff and the tax is just killing them.
Yeah, and here's the thing that nobody really says loudly enough. When they actually leave, the property doesn't disappear.
I know.
They either get sold to owner occupiers, removing them from the rental pool permanently, or they get picked up by larger operators who may or may not be better landlords. The tenants don't certainly get housed better, they just get a different landlord, often at a much higher rent.
And if that different landlord is a large business owner, a pension company, or a bank, they are going to get the rent increase every year. They're not going to get the friendly landlord that comes around on a Sunday night to fix the boiler. They're going to get institutionally managed. And I don't know if that's better for the tenant. The very legislation that is designed to protect the tenants is,
Reducing,
well,
reducing the supply of rental housing and concentrating in fewer hands.
yeah,
That's the law of unintended consequences every single time.
yeah.
It happened in Scotland, it happened to an extent in Wales, and those two parts of the UK are sort of the experimental houses of what should happen in England. And they're a disaster.
Yeah.
They're an absolute
Yeah.
disaster. You know, rent controls in Scotland that didn't work. It's almost like it's 20 mile an hour. You know, did you hear about what happened in Scotland? It was gridlock. It was terrible. Not in Scotland, in Wales. But anyway, that's another
It's
story.
like driving through London with Sadiq's car on 20 miles an hour. Okay, so the landlords that are leaving, what are they doing with their money? Because property is an investment. So if you're not investing in property, what are you investing in?
Well, I think some are selling and just sitting on the cash, waiting for options or opportunities to come up. Some are going into commercial property, which has a lot lower regulatory terms linked to it. Some, and this is one I find most telling, are going into short-term lets, Airbnb, service accommodation. You could say our world.
But for what, for what we know, that's out of the frying pan and into the fire.
Well, until they discover that SA has its own version of complexity, yes, the regulatory pressure on long-term rentals is pushing them into short-term, which is why local authorities are now starting to regulate that too. It's the game of whack-a-mole, and the moles are the landlords, for goodness sake.
I know. And the thing is, the grass isn't always greener. You can just hop from strategy to strategy. But the reality is, it's staying in the game that is where you ultimately make your money.
Yeah. Let's move on to rent to rent.
Oh no.
I'm going to say something that will annoy approximately 100 Instagram property influencers, and I actually don't really care that much.
Oh gosh, here we go.
Rent to rent, as it's been sold and practiced by the get rich in property with no money down brigade, is fucking mugs game.
So tell us how you really feel then.
I mean, I've watched people get absolutely destroyed by it on both sides, both landlords and the rent to renters. And, I want to explain why. I mean, when I used to mentor, rent to rent was a strategy, and it was a strategy for people that didn't have the capital to purchase. It was that low money or no money down
Yep.
strategy. And on paper, it was great, but nobody talked about the risks.
Yeah.
And there's risks on both sides. And I never did like the strategy.
Yeah.
There's people that do make it work,
Yeah.
and they've thought it through, but generally, it's problematic.
So what's the big issue that you have with it?
I think the problem is the margin. You're paying market rent or close to it to a landlord. You're subletting to tenants. The difference between what you pay out and what comes in is supposed to be your profit. And on paper, in a spreadsheet built by someone selling you a course, it looks fine.
But in reality,
In reality, you have a property you don't own, a landlord who can pull the agreement, tenants who have full statutory rights, a maintenance obligation you're responsible for, and a margin that disappears the moment a boiler breaks or a tenant stops paying or a void runs a little bit longer than your model forecasts.
of which all of those can and will happen.
Absolutely, all of those will happen, not might, will.
Yeah. People are trying to find ways to get into property. And if you're starting out with low capital, rent to rent does look attractive. But I think what we're seeing is that with all of these blips and hurdles along the way, as a property investor or a property operator, our sort of long-term focus is, well, at least this property is going to be worth double in 10 years, or at least I can buy it for 40 15 years ago and I can sell it for 140 now. And those blips of limited cash flow along the way get made up with that nice, 100k equity at the end. You don't get that in rent to rent. So it can be all downside and no kind of silver lining upside.
Yeah, indeed. And here's what changed with the Renters' Right Act. Because it was already marginal, now you have periodic tenancies, which means your tenant can leave with 2 months' notice, effectively any time.
Yeah.
Your landlord's mortgage terms may prohibit subletting in the new regulatory environment. Your insurance becomes more complex. Your compliance obligation increases.
And I guess the already thin margins just get squeezed further and further.
From both ends simultaneously, while the people who sold you the dream are on a beach somewhere filming a reel about their lifestyle.
Oh, you're really going in, aren't you?
No, it's not right. I understand what they were trying to do, but nobody talks about the risks. And I think
Mm.
there should be a little bit more conversation about the risks.
So what's the alternative then? Because those who got into rent to rent, they weren't stupid. They were just looking for a potential strategy to get into property without capital. So what else do you do?
And that's a legitimate ambition. The alternative is understanding what you're actually buying. You're not buying a property business when you do rent to rent. You're buying a very thin operating agreement with no asset backing. If you want to be in property, you eventually have to own something. Rent to rent might be a learning ground, but it's a very expensive one. If you treat it as a business model rather than a stepping stone,
Well, you're being quite diplomatic here. You're being a bit more reasonable, I guess.
well, I'm growing as a person.
You're trying. You're trying. Well, look, let's talk about some of the opportunities that are coming post the 1st of May. Because, you've told everyone what's going wrong, which is correct. But what is going right? Why should people still buy? Why are we still buying? There must be a reason.
I think there are several, and they all come from the same place. The people exiting are creating opportunities for those people who understand the new environment.
Okay, I get that, but explain.
Well, firstly, motivated sellers. Landlords who want out are not always holding firm on their price, particularly if they're not. If they've got a property that needs work, tenants in situ, compliance issues they haven't fixed, they want a clean exit. And that creates genuine buying opportunities for people who can move quickly and take on complexity. I mean, we've seen people who want to sell their HMOs, want to sell their, two or three property portfolios, and they just want out.
Yeah,
They said, without saying get us the best price, we'll take anything, but you can get a feel
yeah,
of their quiet desperation
yeah,
because they've just had enough.
yeah. And that's both the accidental landlord and some landlords a little bit further afield who are remote. They're looking at the UK right now and thinking, what is going on? But we take the long game. What else?
Well, I think HMOs specifically, that's probably the second one. The average private rental landlord doesn't want to run an HMO. It's too complex, too regulated, too many people in one building. But the reality is that HMOs command the highest yield per square foot and provide housing for the exact demographic that is most underserved in the UK. Single people, young professionals, people between situations. The market is tightening on supply. Demand is not reducing. If you know how to run them properly, which is a big if, the yield case is actually quite strong.
It can be strong. And, it's taken us a fair few years, but, now we know how to run them.
We know how to run them. That's the point. The barrier is an opportunity, it's the operational complexity, which is where the AI program is genuinely changing that picture for us.
It is, and for the better.
People have asked us, they've probably seen some of our posts and the blogs about Stan. And I think our last podcast we spoke about our tech layer. We understand the complexity of the legislation and what's required from councils at the local level and the government at a national level. So we've said, let's bring in some tech to make us more efficient and do a better job for our landlords and for our tenants.
Yeah.
And that's a plan for 2026. The third thing is obviously service accommodation and corporate lets, short-term furnished for people who are on contracts or relocating for work or just want a temporary situation. The demand is there. The supply from traditional landlords is definitely not. If you can position correctly and operate efficiently, the margins are far better than the long-term ASTs.
Yeah, they can be, with the caveat though.
Well, with the caveat that you need to know what you're doing and you need systems. Otherwise, you're working harder than any landlord you've ever met and making less money.
That's true. And then what's the fourth opportunity then?
Well, I think the obvious one is professional management. I'm going to sound like I'm selling our own book here, but I mean it generally. Landlords who stay in the market are increasingly realize they need to be properly run. The days of I'll pop around and fix things myself are over. The regulatory complexity alone requires professional oversight. The landlords who stay and thrive will either build that capability themselves or pay for it.
Yeah. I mean, and talking about opportunity, I walked into a HMO in Stoke last week. I literally walked in and walked out. The owner had developed a 7-bedroom HMO, and would you believe it didn't even have smoke detectors in the room? Now, I'm not going to blame him directly. He had some builders who were doing the work for him, but ultimately the buck stops with the landlord, and he's developing something that we couldn't even take on and manage because it's not even compliant. So, what's the opportunity? The opportunity out there is to see the people that are not doing it correctly and either buy that property or advise them to do it correctly. But the opportunities are out there because the demand isn't changing, but the backdrop is. And we just need to pivot, which seems to be my favorite word at the moment, because all we do is seem to pivot, but to pivot towards the opportunity each time. And you just got to have your eyes wide open and just looking for it. Okay, let's move on to section 4 then, which is why are we still buying? So let's just get personal on this because we've just got into a sector that is stressed, that is overregulated, it's hemorrhaging small operators, and we're facing a geopolitical situation that we haven't even got to yet. So why on earth are we still buying, Paul?
Because I think the long game hasn't changed. I mean, we have partners that we're looking to buy them out. They want to sell. We might buy out their interests. We've just bought a new property very close to one that we already own, and we're converting that. We're advising other operators that want to do something in the HMO market, and they're getting great valuations. The long game just hasn't changed.
No, it hasn't, but expand on that a bit.
Well, housing in the UK is still undersupplied. We don't build enough, haven't built enough for as long as I can remember. The population keeps growing. The planning system makes new supply painfully slow to bring to market. That hasn't changed. And it won't change for the next 5 years. The fundamental demand for rental housing is not going away.
But the rules around providing it are changing significantly.
They have. And that's actually the opportunity because every time the rules change and complexity increases, the operators who can adapt or don't want to adapt leave, they exit.
Yeah.
That concentrates the market in the hands of people who can navigate complexity, which if you're one of those people is exactly where you want to be. I mean, the psychology of that is, when the going gets tough, the tough gets going.
Yeah.
And, we see it in the stock market. I remember back in 2008 or 2011 was a classic example where everybody ran for the hills because they thought the world was coming to an end. But if you were, we're in the UK, but I remember sitting with my business partner at the time and saying that we could buy a beautiful two-bedroom apartment in Florida for the same price as a car, $25,000.
Yeah.
Now, that's how far prices had dropped during
Yeah.
that particular time.
Yeah.
In the UK, it wasn't dissimilar as well. So people panic.
They
When they
do.
see a lot of legislation, when they see things going wrong, they panic and their lives are opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, you've been in business for nearly 40 years, and there's always something, but there's always some sort of hostile regulatory environment that you just have to pivot and overcome, and it's not easy.
Well, if you remember, we did a podcast episode probably about a year and a bit ago when we talked about the history of property, and I think we went back, I want to say 1,000 years, and certainly a few hundred years, and the direction of traffic was up and to the right,
Mm,
up and to the right, and you can go back. There's lots of statistics to reconfirm that, but short term, people panic.
yeah.
Short-term people panic. What's the phrase that I used to say? People overestimate what they can achieve in a year and underestimate what they can achieve in 10 years.
And from my perspective, we're buying in specific geographical locations at specific price points for a very specific tenant profile. It's not just buy anywhere, buy it because it's cheap, buy it and property's going to go up. There's a strategy behind it to, eradicate most of the risk and ensure that over time it'll end up being a successful investment.
Absolutely, absolutely. Buy the right property in the right place at the right price for the right end user and manage it well.
Yeah.
Sentence not new. What change is what manage it properly means in 2026. It means compliance, it means systems, it means treating it as a business and not just a hobby.
Yeah, because the government's waiting for you to treat it like a hobby. They're waiting for you with their checkbook, and you got to navigate that. That's so important right now.
And the one thing I'd say is, and this is not investment advice, is our solicitor will thank me for that, is that the people wringing their hands about whether now is the right time are making a decision by not making a decision.
Yeah.
Capital sitting in a bank account is making its own choice. At least make yours consciously.
Yeah. There's always the people waiting for the right time to buy, and it's those same people that have been waiting for like 20 years for the right time to buy.
What
Um,
is that phrase I used, that Chinese phrase? The best time to buy a property was 20 years ago. The second best time is now.
I think the Chinese phrase was the best time to plant a tree
Was it?
was 20 years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah.
The second best time to plant a tree is now. I guess the analogy is exactly the same. Okay, I want to take a bit of a left turn here because we've been talking about the market. Let's talk about us a bit because this is a real series about real businesses. And the honest question, as Alma would say, how are we actually doing?
Define doing.
Well, let's talk about stress levels, Paul. On a scale of 1 to 10, this year so far,
I would say 10 being I want to jump out the window, 1 being relaxed and horizontal. Honestly, I'd probably say about a 6.
okay. Well, you're always pretty chilled. I'm going to say that mine's probably higher than last year, but lower than I expected. I mean, it's almost like we're waiting for the world to end on Friday, Friday being the 1st of May. I'm not as stressed as I thought I would be, but that's because I know what's coming, which I know sounds a bit contradictory.
Well, it's not contradictory. It means the things you were worried about turned out to be manageable, and the things you weren't worried about turned out to be probably just annoying.
That's exactly it. I thought the Renters' Rights Act was going to be the main stressor, and it is a stressor, but the day to day has actually got a little bit easier because of the tech that we've built in. Let's talk about Stan.
Or as one commentator said, long live Stan.
Long live Stan. Or Stan is taking a movement. Stan is taking a movement. Just as a little mention, if you haven't seen the YouTube interview, Paul actually interviews Stan. You can go on our YouTube channel and check it out. It's quite the watch. If you think about Stan, we're not having to personally field a WhatsApp message at 10 o'clock at night about another missing Wi-Fi password. That genuinely changes the experience of the business.
Yeah, and you don't realize, whether you've outsourced that or whether you're doing it yourself, what a stressor that is. Well, so when that gets taken off the table, it makes a huge difference.
It does. I mean, if you think that thousands and thousands and thousands of WhatsApp messages are being sent and received in our business every week, and Stan is first responder, not the complete resolver, but first responder to what was it, 12,000 WhatsApp messages in the space of 6 weeks?
Crazy. Crazy.
That does just give you a little bit of peace of mind. And
Yeah.
that's, one of seven. So that's been easier than expected. What would you say has been a bit easier for you, Paul?
The one thing I'll say publicly about stress, there's kind of a low grade ambient anxiety that comes with running a property business right now.
That's true.
And I don't think we talk about that enough in this sector. It's not a crisis, just a permanent sense that something could change, another piece of legislation, another tenant rights campaign, another interest rate
Yeah.
surprise.
It's just that like noise that's kind of always there.
Yeah, the noise. And what I found this year, partly because of the tech work, is that building systems can reduce the noise. Not because the noise goes away, but because you start carrying it all in your head.
That's actually quite profound, to be fair.
Don't sound so surprised.
All right, let's move on to my stressor. So, HMO inspections, whether it's Crewe, Stoke, and even Burton have now started. The HMO officers are pounding the streets and they're picking up the phones to the HMO landlords who answer them. That's my biggest gripe. But yeah,
I wonder if they've been paid a little bit more money and they're like motivated, or whether they're on commission now to go out and inspect more.
well, look,
So you've had what, 5 inspections, HMO inspections with council HMO officers in one day.
yeah.
Pray tell.
It's like, it's been building up. When it was like, let's do two in a day, let's do three in a day. Now it's like, let's do five in a day, like we haven't got anything else to do. I just don't know where to begin.
Beginning is a bad starting point.
Okay, well, here's my first gripe. If you, as a local authority, have a brief, have a mandate to improve the quality of HMO accommodation by doing inspections to catch out, the landlords that aren't doing it properly, to get on top of them, not necessarily just to find them, but to advise them and guide them and improve them, you don't just call the landlords that are getting it right. because you're not going to find a cannabis farm in my roof. You're not going to find a house without fire doors. You're not going to find missing smoke alarms. You might find a tenant who's lit a candle in a room when he shouldn't. Think like day-to-day things that you have to manage. An extension lead that shouldn't be used. But I guess that's my gripe, Paul. It's that
Yeah.
we're out there pounding the streets and we're not really the problem.
This is how the system works in this country, and this is how it works. It has worked for a while. You go for the ones that can pay.
Yeah,
No good going for the poor
I
or the
know.
illegal
I know.
or the uber rich who can afford big old lawyers. You go for the people in the middle who can't afford the expensive lawyers, who want to do it right, and you try and get money out of them.
Yeah,
And unfortunately, that's the way the system is, whether it's for tax, whether it's for HMO inspections.
yeah.
That's the way it is.
And the thing is, it's not even sustainable because, we've got more and more compliance and legislation to battle with, which means our time is more and more precious. And, we're spending it doing things that should be done, but just in less volume.
Well, this is why we're building Reggie, our regulation AI agent, because the alternative is Amanda doing 4, 5, 6, 7 inspections a day, which is, and I say this with genuine concern for her well-being, just not sustainable,
No,
not going
it's
to
not
happen.
going to happen. And I am lucky that we have built relationships with our local HMO officers. Not all of them are great, but the few that we're working with now, we've got good relationships with. It's a pleasure to see them, it's a pleasure to speak with them, but it's just the volume now. And, I always like to go because, I am the face of the business on the ground operationally, and I do like to meet them because I like to find out what's going on the ground and, keep my ear close to things that might happen. Is Article 4 coming in Stoke, or just to get a feel for a sense check in with the local authority. But as I say, just the volume now is just getting a little bit crazy.
Well, I think the serious point here is that the council's increased inspection activities is a signal, a clear signal. They're going up to enforce the Renters' Rights Act hasn't just created new tenant rights, it's given enforcement agencies a new renewed mandate. In some cases, new funding. The councils that have historically been light touch and HMO compliance, they're changing.
And the landlords who have been getting away with things for a while.
Are going to stop getting away with them. And this is where I genuinely believe the small, well-run operator has an advantage over the accidental landlord who just hasn't kept up. If your compliance is solid, council inspection day is not a terrifying event. It's just another day at the office.
A busy day at the office, but another day at the office.
Well, the next section is, I thought we threw it in. It was based on some articles that I read over the last week. Anti-wealth and anti-landlord protests, quite aggressive protests. How does that affect us? So I want to talk about something that I think a lot of landlords and property people are feeling, but not really discussing publicly, the cultural climate.
And the protests.
Yeah, and the protests, the rhetoric. The way property ownership has been reframed in the public discourse, not as a legitimate investment in the service, but as extraction, as hoarding, as part of a system that is actively making young people's lives worse,
Which, I
which
mean,
which has an element of truth and an enormous amount of oversimplification. And I want to hold both of those things at the same time. I think there's inequality which we need to talk about. I don't think you can have a conversation about property owners and wealth without talking about inequality. We know that's growing in the country. And maybe this protesting is a path to reduce that inequality. Maybe the government, especially this particular government, feels the way to do that is to legislate us to death and to punish us and fine us as much as they can. And they think that's going to reduce inequality. I am not so sure.
maybe Gary's economics has got it right.
Gary's Economics, your friend Gary's Economics, very, very interesting chap. Talks a lot of sense, talks a lot of sense.
I mean, there is a gap. We know there's a gap. I was on Facebook the other day and there was, I think it's called, there's a movement called Generation Rent, and there's another one called the Renters Union. and they were calling landlords parasites, the worst people in society. They were really going in. And like you said, it's oversimplification here. And there's not an other side of the story being portrayed, which has always been our gripe, hasn't it?
And it's uncomfortable. I think the honest thing to say is that not all landlords are actually the same. The person who has been in breach of their HMO license, who has ignored repairs, or who has used Section 21 as a management tool, they're a different category of operator, the person running a compliant, well-maintained property with responsive management.
Yeah. But the public, they don't make that distinction.
Yeah, the public doesn't make that distinction at all, and to some extent, nor does the legislation. The good operators are caught in the same regulatory tightening as the bad ones, which is, and I know I'm going to sound like a landlord lobbyist here, it's genuinely true, but it's totally unfair.
Yeah. Yeah.
What I think property operators need to do, and this is something I've been thinking about a lot, is get better at selling a different story.
Yeah.
Not a defensive story, a different one about the housing they provide, the service they give, the tenants who live well in their properties. And if you remember, when we first got into property in Stoke, we took properties that were run down, damp,
Yeah.
and we upgraded them,
Yeah.
spent tens of thousands of pounds upgrading them so people could live in them.
Yeah.
That story is never told.
No.
And we need to create a little bit more of a more positive narrative to tell that story. And unfortunately, we live in a society where bad news sells better than good news. But I think there is still an opportunity for a different narrative.
Do you remember when we bought that property? I think it was in Audley in ST7 in Stoke, if I remember rightly. A lady had passed away, unfortunately. And when we bought the property, it didn't have a bathroom.
Yeah.
It only had an outside loo, which we couldn't believe. It had an oven in there that looked like it was from the, I don't know, 1800s.
Wood Street, wasn't it?
It was Wood Street. I just don't know how you remember these roads. And we completely renovated it. We insulated it. We did the damp work. We put a lovely ensuite upstairs. We obviously put in a bathroom into the property. Sold it to a first-time buyer couple with a child. They loved that house. And, they would not have been able to do what we did purely through lack of funds for a first-time buyer. It was a proper service that we were doing. And we were rolling those out quite frequently back then.
Yeah, we get vilified for the things that people don't understand and people don't appreciate. And to a lesser extent, it's our fault. The truth be told, I probably blame the NRLA,
Well,
but
don't let Ben hear that.
that's a story for another time. Anyway, let's go on to the last section of this mammoth podcast, the Straits of Hormuz and why it matters in your property business.
I mean, the Strait of Hormuz, never have we all said that phrase so much as we have in recent weeks. I said I wasn't sure how this was going to be relevant, Paul, but you wanted to add it in, so I'm reserving judgment.
Fair enough, let me make the case. The strait is the narrow waterway between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. It's about 20% of the world's oil that passes through it. That's 1 in 5 barrels of oil. In periods of tension, and right now there is significant tension involving Iran, US carrier groups, Houthi rebels, activities in the Red Sea. The whole regional picture is just a disaster. The possibility of disruption to that checkpoint is a clear and present danger.
I agree, but, why do property investors care about that?
Because of energy prices, because of inflation, because of interest rates. If you even think about, we were about to put a mortgage on one of our HMOs, and we were expecting something like 5 point something percent with a 2 to 3% product fee. And that is now 6 point something percent with a 3 to 4% product fee. So overnight. And there's construction materials because the entire cost base of running and developing property has energy embedded into it. A Strait of Hormuz incident doesn't stay in the Gulf. It arrives in your heating bills, your contractor invoices, your mortgage rates within weeks.
Yeah, even within days. We went through this in 2022. Remember the whole energy spike?
Tell me about it. We did. And if you operated through 22 and 23 in the property sector, you definitely felt it. Contractors put their rates up, materials costs spiked, some jobs became economically unviable. at the prices tenants could bear. That's not a historical curiosity, it's a preview.
It is. It's an insight to the future, isn't it? I mean, the past always tells us what's going to happen in the future. So, what do you do with now we have that information as a property operator?
Well, I think the only thing you can do is to stress test. You look at your cost base and ask, if energy and materials go up 30%, what does that do to my operating margin? If your margin can't absorb it, mention the rent-to-rent operator,
Yeah.
that's not a macro problem. That's a unit economics problem that was always there. The
Yeah,
macro just revealed it.
that's true. I mean, in layman's terms, when the tide goes out, we see who is swimming with their pants down.
Yeah, that's the phrase. That's the
And that's
phrase.
where we're at. So the thing that I find interesting about this is that people in property often don't think about themselves as global, international investors, but they are.
Unless they listen to our podcast, because we've talked about this on a couple of occasions. We talked about it when Trump came into power and a couple of other instances. I think it was the Ukraine invasion. We talked about it then. But every single property business in the UK is exposed to global energy markets, global material supply chains, global interest rate movements driven by the Fed, ECB. You bought a house in Stoke-on-Trent and you're exposed to the Strait of Hormuz. Who knew?
I know. Doesn't knowing that help? Does knowing that help, or does it just make it even more stressful?
Knowing it means you can plan for it. Not knowing it means it arrives as a surprise. I prefer the former.
That's true. I mean, with information, I guess we can plan. That's the best thing that we can do. So, okay, right. We have covered, let me count, landlord exodus, rent to rent, the Post Renters' Right Act opportunities, why we're still buying. What else have we gone through? We've gone through stress levels, particularly mine, 5 inspections in one day. I don't know.
That makes me tired just thinking about it.
We've gone through anti-landlord protests, the geopolitical risk picture. That's quite a lot for one episode.
There's a lot going on,
There always has been, though. We just talk about it now.
which I think is the point. If you're a property operator and you feel like you're carrying this alone, you're not. Every person we speak to in this sector is navigating the same landscape. Some are doing it consciously, some are doing it by default. The difference between those two groups over time is significant.
Yeah, yeah. What's the one thing that you want people to take away from this episode, Paul?
One thing I would say the chaos is the landscape now.
Mm,
This isn't a temporary disruption before things settle back to normal. The normal is disruption.
mm,
The operators who thrive aren't the ones who find stable ground. They're the ones who learn to work well with instability.
yeah. I mean, where can people follow what we're doing? It's kind of obvious, but
Well, LinkedIn, they can search Essential Management or Paul Samuda or Amanda Woodward. We've been documenting the AI transformation work since the beginning of March. We do something every week, full transparency, our wins, our losses, the whole kit caboodle. We call it the transformation year. And of course,
the podcast. But I'm so pleased we've managed to get Paul onto social media. It's actually only taken me about 20 years of knowing you to actually get you onto social media. And I tell you the only reason that he's posting is because it's about AI. He doesn't want to post about property. He leaves that to me. It's all about AI and his bromance with Stan.
well, I've got a secret to tell you. I might do my first reel tomorrow.
Oh my goodness, what
I'm,
face to camera?
I might do my
Oh my
first face to
goodness,
camera
what a
reel.
revelation.
Uh,
But look, the podcast really, we, endeavor to keep our listeners updated with our thoughts, our feelings, now our stress levels. It's a little bit personal
yeah.
with what's going on. And we bring in some outsiders as well to get their opinion on things, just to change it up a little bit. So wherever you're listening now, if it's YouTube, Spotify, Audible, whatever it is, tell people about it. Subscribe to it, maybe even leave a review. Tell somebody who's in property, who's feeling the pressure. We're not selling anything. We just want to share real activity. And I guess I like to hope that's what we're doing here. So take care, everyone.
See you next episode.